The title of my sermon today is Godly to the Bone. Godly to the bone. In America a few decades ago, we had a singer named George Thorogood. And he only had about one hit. He was a one-hit wonder. But his hit is still played even today, and that is titled Bad to the Bone. Any of you ever heard that song? Bad to the Bone. And it's played because he wanted to describe what he was like, who he was like. Well, I want to talk about what we hopefully have experienced in the last 7 days, is striving to be more godly to the very bone. Not bad to the bone, that's kind of the opposite of what we're hoping to accomplish by the days of unleavened bread and what God's given us to do, and the teachings that even Dale brought out, what we want to be. But you will know a song that was very popular decades ago as I was looking it up. And that song is from Trinidad called Trinity to the Bone. Everybody heard that song? Well, I only see 3 hands that went up. So there's 4, there's 5. Okay, almost everybody. There may be 1 or 2. So if you didn't, let's play a little bit of Trinity to the Bone this morning. On there. Bone. I see some raise their hand. That song is catchy. Mary came into my office because she heard me playing it like 2 or 3 times in a row. See, she said, "Oh, I'm going to miss that. I'll be there." The song is catchy. It sticks in your mind. It has a good beat. Makes you feel, pumped up, I guess. Well, we were looking at some pictures there of some things that you may say makes you Trinity to the bone. How about the food? I know you're pretty famous for the food. I know he wants to sing again. It's hard to keep it down. What about your food? Does that make you a Trinity? Because you know how to eat, you know how to cook. But I don't think, as the Bible says, man shall not live on bread alone. Or that blessed are those who hunger and thirst for doubles or macaroni pie. Happy are those who lime all day. But it is a different country, Trinidad and Tobago, from others, because I go to 10 different islands, 10 different nations across the Caribbean, even South America and Suriname. And it is different. But there's some good stuff here. But there's also some other stuff that's not as good, is it? What makes you you? Is it being born in Trinidad or Tobago? Does that make you Trinity to the bone by being born? Well, a lot of people would say so. The things that define you, what are they? For the last 7 days, you have focused on being not Trinity to the bone, but more godly to the bone. What does it mean to be godly to the bone? Do we understand? Are we closer to that? I know one of the lines in the song says that some people say God is a what? Trinity. Is he? think He's here today. He's with His people. But I'd like to look at a checklist, the time I have here today. And that checklist helps us to see, after going through this rejection of puffed up, this acceptance of this flat bread, sometimes tasteless bread, that we have all partaken of, hopefully. It's the only day of the week I haven't eaten, this week that I haven't eaten unleavened bread. But I brought some back there, so I'll have some at lunch. I usually start out every morning. My wife bakes some stuff that's unleavened, and it's pretty good. So I have no problem eating that, but I like the first thing in the morning. I get up, I have a glass of water. Then I go and I take those matzos, the tasteless, cardboard-tasting piece of that, and I chew it to get me started out. Right? So it focuses me on where I'm at during these days, and what I need to be thinking on, what I don't need to be thinking on, as I strive to do that. But I wanted to give you a checklist today on being godly to the bone. And these are 4 cornerstones of being godly to the bone. They are 4 that are mine. You may even add to this list. You may say there's more than 4, because there's some other thoughts in here today also. But I would like to go there and look at these 4 cornerstones and see if they match up with you. Is it something that you can take from here and go forward? Is it something that we as a church in Trinidad need to adopt, adapt to these cornerstones that make us not just surface godly, right? Haven't you seen people who are godly on the surface? They may look like it, they may dress really well, they may say these special words, or they sound religious words. I have a guy that I know, he doesn't go to any church. He used to live where I did in condos, and he would just always make this point of when he would see me, "How is thou today?" Because he thought I needed to, hey, I need to be religious in front of you. I need to be godly in front of you. How is thou? Is thy wife doing well? I could laugh with him. Matter of fact, later on I would throw out scriptures. How does thou find Matthew 6:23? But I want to look, because we don't need to be a surface people who are godly to the surface. Only skin. Is this what God wants? Not really. We've all met those people. We've had those people in church. And so I want to go through these 4 cornerstones today. And hopefully you can look at these scriptures. If not, they'll be up here. Because I think it's important that we walk away from these spring holy days, this spring holy day, changed. In some way, shape, or form. Not totally changed. We're not there yet. But hopefully we're going down that road, going down that path, striving to be more godly. So let's go. The very first scripture. I'd like you to turn there as one of my heroes of the Bible that I really enjoy his story. I've been working on a sermon for 2 years on him that I wanted to just give. And that individual is Joshua. So I'll be reading from the New King James Version. If you want to join us, or it'll be right up here. You can read along with me. Let's turn to Joshua. Joshua 1, as he has now taken over the roughly 2 million people supposedly there, and going in and taking the people into the Promised Land. He is now the grand poobah He is the head over all these people. And He's taken them in, and God's given Him that responsibility. And let's go here and look. Because the very first one, I'd like to point out, number one, 4 cornerstones is what we learned from Joshua: obedience. Obedience. We have to obey God. That's the chief cornerstone. So let's go there in Joshua 1, and we'll start verse 7. It said, only be strong and very, what? And very courageous, that you may observe to do according to all the law. Is that us? Or can we just pick and choose? I like this one. I like this one. But no, I don't really need to go by that one. No. God is instructing here, but He's instructing us. You may observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. Do we want prosperity? I think most of us do. If you've experienced the opposite of prosperity, guess what? You're going to say, I think I want prosperity. So don't turn to the left or to the right. Yes. In the New Living Translation, you don't have this, but I kind of liked it because in the same verse it says, do not deviate from my words, either to the right or to the left. What does it mean, right or to the left? Well, the Pharisees, when they were here, they were far to the right. They wanted to make it very restrictive, everything. They took the law and said, oh, we can make it even better than that. Because I loved one of their laws they had on the Sabbath day, or a holy day. I thought about this morning as I was looking at my hair. Because one of their laws was on the Sabbath you couldn't look in a mirror. You couldn't look at one. Because you might see a gray hair and you may want to pull it out. Well, I would be in trouble because I don't have anything but gray hair. So I would have been harvesting all that hair, I guess, by pulling it out. But you can see I'm going so far right. And then you're able to be, well, you don't have to do this. No. Just look at it. And we have the perfect example for us as human beings because Jesus Christ came and He lived. And He interacted. And He didn't sin. And He followed. He observed all the law. And He gave us an example in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. How to do it. And you know, I have to read those because I need to see how to handle some situations. I need to handle the good times and the bad times. As Dale was talking about, when you get way up here, go high. How do you handle that? And then how do you handle when you're the lowest of lows? I think about highs because even people treat you different at the highs, don't they? They had a giveaway at a bank one time in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I would always fill these things out and had a certain way that I did the little cards. So like I would take a card like this and they had you fill it out and you had to slide it into this thing. I learned from a guy one time that won quite a few things that if you do that, if you just do it like this, and then you slide it in there, with it all crumpled up, that when they shake it around to make the drawing, this pushes everybody else's card away. You have a greater chance of winning. This guy won an amazing thing. I did it on 5 or 6 things that I had put things in. I found it to be amazing, so if you ever win something, you'll know why. I don't hardly do it anymore. I don't even see those things, but I remember because it was this bank grand opening. And so here they had, if you if they pulled your name out for this grand opening, you could win $1 million. And that was back in the late 80s, when $1 million was $1 million. So that'd be like 2 or 3 now, probably. And so here, I didn't even think about it, but all of a sudden I get the phone call a day later, and I had won $1 million. The bank, they called, and my card was pulled out. They said it was a little crumpled. But I won $1 million. So people heard this on the radio in my town, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. They knew who I was. They wanted to visit. What was he need? He's got a business. What does he need $1 million? Why did he win it? And then all of a sudden people started treating you really well, because all they heard was $1 million. And I got a limo ride to this place and at this country club and had this big meal and all this kind of stuff. They made pictures, took pictures and all this kind of stuff. And so people said, oh wow, well, aren't you great? Well, they didn't read the fine print. I read the fine print. The fine print was, I did win $1 million. But it was only for 3 days. And it stayed in their bank and I earned interest. So I actually got the interest, which is a lot better than interest was now, because it came to $600 or $700 US was the interest back then. But it was amazing that people in town that never knew that, they were still, oh, hi, Chuck, hey, can I borrow some money? You know, like that. And you had those, oh, well, you know, why do I need to buy from you? You don't need my business. You don't need. No. But it's amazing how people will treat you. God is a respecter of persons. When He gives us obedience, it's like for everybody. He doesn't say, oh, you don't have to do this or you don't have to do that. It's one of the cornerstones. Let's go and finish reading these verses. So don't turn to the left and to the right, that you may prosper wherever you go. The book of the law shall not depart from your mouth. What does that mean? That means for it needs to be in there. The book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night. That's going to come in handy this week. I don't know about you guys. I'm spending a little extra time reading. Do we know it? Or do we just know, there's some verses. I know these certain verses. Or do we know the story? Do we know the characters? Do we know the people who came before us? You shall meditate on it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Asking us to do this, commanding us to do it. I found it interesting because one translation says about the Bible in this verse, you're constantly in it. Constantly in it. It isn't like, wow, let me pull those pages. Well, that one, can't hardly get the pages apart. Remember how a new Bible is? And you know how when you get a new Bible, you have to pull the pages just like this? What if you've been baptized and been in the church for 10, 20 years? There should be a page that you shouldn't have, right? Wouldn't that be a surface bone if you just like, wow, this place, oh, I didn't even know that book was in there. That's part of being godly to the bone. This is our manual. Deep godliness to the bone. Obedience. Number one. One of the cornerstones. Let's go to number two. Number two. Cornerstones of being godly to the bone. Agape. Agape. You know what it is, right? Have you ever taken concordance and looked up love, because that's what you'll find it under, translated love. But then you see, it's a Greek word, agape or agapeo, but you'll see that it's the same word, agape, agapeo, is used all through Christ's ministry. All through Paul's ministry. And the majority of the time it's not talking about eros. It's not talking about brotherly love, but it's talking about what? Godly love. It's a cornerstone of this church. It must be. Otherwise, it's not God's church. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples if you have what? Hate towards one another. It's not what it says. If you have envy towards one another. No. By this shall all men know. This is what Christ's last words were. If you have agape, look it up. I'm not making it up. Look it up. Agape. Agapeo. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 13. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 13. I think this stands out as an incredible chapter, because it's considered the love chapter. The agape chapter. I had a young man going to ABC one time. He was in my church, and he said, you know, I don't want to be too intimidated when I get up there. And he said, well, would you go over some things that I run into? I don't want to look like an idiot when I get up there. Well, guess what? After a meeting, he said, I'm going to look like an idiot. I said, you got a lot of brushing up to do in the 2 months before you go. But you're going there to learn. Because one of the things I asked him, where's the love chapter? What's the love chapter in the Bible? That's a simple one. No, it's 1 Corinthians 13. It's the agape chapter. And tells about it because I know whenever I've done a wedding, this is part of the wedding vows that I do, that the couple can understand what God expects. What love is, not just eros, but what agape is, godly love is. But it comes down to 1 Corinthians 13 and verse 13 as he's talking about all these things. But he says, and now abide faith, hope, and love, these three, but the greatest of these is what? Agape. The greatest of all this. It even goes back to the same chapter in verse 2. It said, hey, you can know all prophecy. Right? You can know all mysteries. You can have all knowledge. But if you do not have agape, godly love, he said you're nothing. You're nothing. This is what it means to be godly to the bone, is what we do to each other and for each other and by each other is because we have love all the way to the bone. All the way to the bone. We love. I find interesting in one of my theology classes, this was put forth by a teacher. I didn't really buy into it. He wasn't really selling it as the gospel, but he was selling what's out there. One of those teachings is that Galatians 5:22, which lists the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, goodness, kindness, gentleness, long-suffering, self-control. He mentioned and read this thesis by this individual that said that, and he took the Greek apart, and he did this, and kind of jumped through some hoops and made it like the fruits of God's Spirit of love is joy, peace, and that everything came from agape. Now he had to do some spiritual and Greek gymnastics to make that happen because it wasn't in the original manuscripts. But it did make you think about, I've never forgotten it, because it did make me think how powerful love was. Because if we do have agape in us, all the way to the bone, we will have peace in our life. We'll bring peace in other people's lives. We'll have joy in our life. We'll bring joy to others. Goodness, kindness, gentleness. That's all part of it. So how important is this second cornerstone? Agape? Pretty important. So if you walk out after sunset tonight, because even though it starts another Sabbath, it's the holy day season, it's over. That's sunset. Can you set your mind on having agape all the way to the bone? Is it something you can personally work on? Because it will change your life. And it will change others around you. Is that important? I know because I have to work on it. And I'm going, boy. As I ate one piece of bread this week, that unleavened bread, it made me think, I need more agape. Number three, third cornerstone, being godly to the bone. Humility. Humility. Boy, is that ever tough. Dale mentioned it on his scripture. He even touched on it. But I want to look at it from church-wise. Because we're planning on doing something big. Starting next Friday as we kick off. Because we're going to be preaching the gospel. We're going to be creating something that's never been done. And we're going to infect, hopefully, a million people between Trinidad and Tobago. We're going to reach 1 million people. That's pretty good. Never been done. Now, how that will affect, we don't know. But we're going to introduce them to perhaps a God they've never known. And we have to represent the God that most of them they've never known or they didn't understand. Will they see humility? Because when you saw Christ 1900 years ago, you saw humility. You saw people who could come up and talk to him at any time, not just because he healed, because he did, and a lot of them did. No. It was, this is a man with so much knowledge, but he was humble, so even the little children would want to come up and sit on his lap. And he can tell the disciples, you read the story, the disciples, they're freaking out over this, going, hey, they're not used to that. Makes me wonder if before that they ever had a child want to come up and sit on your lap and spend time with you because they get off and like, move them out. He's too busy for that. What an example of humility. That even the poorest, even the sickest, even those who were not even to come near him, wanted to come near him. Humility is what he taught his last night as a human being on earth. Tried to get it to his disciples. Let's go where Dale went earlier. Ephesians 4. Ephesians 4, I'll read verse number 1 like he did. Verse 1. But verse number 2 says, with all lowliness and gentleness, with long suffering, bearing with one another in what? What we just talked about. Agape. Bearing with one another. You ever had to bear with somebody? Long. It happens. But it says that we should. We should want to do that. The New Living Translation, I'll just pull it up right here. Verse 2. This is instruction for us as a church. So when people come in, if God finds us so doing his work that he can call people into this spiritual hospital on this island. If he can do that, if he will do that, will he find those people who are looking for humble people? Have you ever done that? You ever went to a place, was invited to a place, and you didn't know it was a place everybody dressed up, and you went in and you weren't dressed up, and how they all looked at you like, So, one of the things that I've come across, because in Vero Beach, we've had new people attend, they've called, they've never been in church before, they've had some experience, had bad experiences, but they're coming in and I've been able to work with them and talk with them. And they were intimidated because they didn't know what kind of church they would walk into. They didn't know what kind of people are these judgmental people. Are they racist? Are they bigots? Are they loving and caring people? Well, I think because that church has really shown this incredible amount of agape and humility that people are staying. They're coming back. They're even watching on the webcast that we have. But here's what it says in New Living Translation, verse 2. You look at what the New King James says. But in the New Living it says, always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Agape. Make every effort, it says in verse 3, to keep yourselves united in the Spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. Is this the church people are going to find? Because this evangelistic work we will be doing, this outreach to Trinidad and Tobago, we will spend some money. A lot of time we'll go into, and we'll talk about that during the meeting Bible study and stuff this afternoon. But a lot of effort is going to go into this. And the results are going to show by the people's experience. walking into this building on the Sabbath. Cornerstones. But bearing with one another. Matter of fact, go over in verse 19. Ephesians 3 and verse 19. I don't have that one. But it says, to know the love of Christ, which passes knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. This is what? Well, I could put it another way. Not just the fullness of God, but godly to the bone. This is what he's saying. And you know, there's some bad phrases there in the world because we think, in my case where I had to go, when I had cancer, and he said, well, we need to make sure it's not in your bone. Because if it's cancer in your bone, you don't have much time. So it can be a bad thing, but no, being godly to the bone is righteousness inside you, all the way full, as it says here. Full. That's what God wants. That's what God needs for people who are struggling out in this world. Let's go to number 4. The fourth cornerstone. Fourth cornerstone, patience. Patience. Why is that such a big deal? Because it is. Are we patient? Are we going to be patient with people? And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Because it does require a great deal of patience. Let's go with me to Galatians. Let's go to Galatians 6. Galatians 6 and verse 9. Galatians 6 and verse 9. And let us not grow weary while doing good. You ever done that? Boy, I'm tired. I just don't. Haven't I done enough? Oh no, we're talking about something major that we're going to be doing for the next year. And on past there, the people are not going to be involved in. This is not. And I thought about this even flying it. Because, when I'm on the airplane, and I've flown so much in the last 10, 12 years, when you fly, what do people see? The pilot. The pilot. And you don't want to see some pilot that gets on the plane looking like a homeless guy, do you? No. You want to see somebody that looks the part. But the pilot is just, as we were starting to land yesterday, people could see the land, the little boy on the end of the had it up, and he was just looking, he's 4 years old, looking at the land, and I was thinking, yes, with this thing we're going to do, with this church we have here, is this not for us? It's for others. And I'm just the pilot. But I didn't get here yesterday because that pilot only did his job. I made it because the maintenance people who worked on the plane, the ones who unloaded, the ones who checked us in, the ones who riveted all those thousands of rivets in that airplane. All the maintenance people, you never see them, but they're there. Brother, I'm the pilot. You're the one that's going to make this thing fly. It can't fly without you. And we want to preach the gospel to the end. And he finds us so doing, as the scripture said. So we're going to need patience, so let's go there. Verse 9. And so let us not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of faith. I have people ask me constantly, around there, would you like to give to this? We go to the grocery grocery store and it's like, oh, wouldn't you love to do this? Wouldn't you love to do this? Oh, wouldn't you love to give this? And we need your help. And my answer is always the same. Yes, I'd like to help, but I help the household of faith first. That's what I'm told to do. I help people in the world, but sorry, the church comes, brethren, to God's call comes first. So, I love the word especially. Especially. You means firstly. Firstly. We need to be there for each other. Because if people in this fellowship, our own fellowship, do not see godly to the bone through obedience, through agape, through humility, and through patience, do you think anyone coming in is going to see it? No. No. This fourth pillar, this patience, is about others, serving others outside ourselves. We have to want to do that because God calls others. Godly to the bone. Is that us? Job 31:1. Job 31:1. Men, I'd like to talk to you here today. You know, this is so profound. Very profound. That Job was saying, part of being godly to the bone, that he made a covenant with his eyes. Why? Because 80% of all men they found are visual. We look at stuff. We're attracted to stuff. And there's a lot of stuff that we have to watch. He made a covenant with his eyes about young women. You know, what I found interesting when I just will type in different words about Trinidad, Tobago, at different times as I'm thinking about it, as I'm describing to other people, one of the things that comes up most often is, they have some of the most beautiful women in the world. I said, yeah? Well, did you know that Trinidad and Tobago is one of only, so many countries, and they're the smallest country in the entire world that had 8 women that went to Miss Universe. 8 times. And 1 or 2 even won. Now, why do I bring that up? Because we're men. We have to look. To stay godly to the bone, we have to watch our eyes. So, am I just going to pick on you, us men? No. Because I asked my wife, I said, what do you see as a problem, not just in Trinidad, but all the other churches that I look after with the women? And she said, well, I don't think it's a big problem, but it is. I said, tell me. She said, I think too many women are easily offended in the church. They take offense at things where people don't mean it because they're trying to work. I said, well, yeah. But that goes all the way back to where Paul was telling the Corinthians to bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. And Mary and I work at this because I will say something sometimes. She said, why are you mad? I'm not mad. She said, yes, you are. You're mad. And I find myself, I'm upset about something else, but I'm saying it to her. And I'm not saying I'm using that tone because I'm upset with this. And so I realized how easy it is. Let's go to 2 Corinthians 5. Go to 2 Corinthians this time. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 17. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 17. This should help us all. Because ourselves to God. We did that Passover. Okay? It reminds us of who we are, what we should be. That means godly to the bone. But it says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he or she is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. That is who we should be. We should strive. Because it's very interesting that, and I'll talk about that tomorrow when I go into another sermon. But there is one individual that I will talk about more tomorrow than anyone else, and that's John. The Apostle John. He was unique. Can you think of why he was unique? Anybody? He wasn't martyred, I believe. The only disciple wasn't martyred. Okay?
Was the apostle of love.
He was the apostle of agape, right? Yes. John was so unique. But the most unique thing about this is when you read 1 John, 2 John, and 3 John. By that time, he had already been on the island of Patmos. He had left, went back to Ephesus, where he was not even welcomed in his own church, some of them. But he went back to Ephesus to live his last few years. But before that time, he was in Patmos, where God gave him all the visions of Revelation. So when you read 1 John and 2 John, these are after he had seen the vision. And look at his words, because he got to see the future. Okay, he got to see through a vision. He saw the throne room of God. He saw the holy angels. He saw all the cherubim. He saw this. He saw the beast power. He saw the two witnesses. He saw what the future is, what it's like, and what it's going to be like. Amazing. He saw what it's going to be like just before Christ returns and during his return. He saw it all. So should his words carry weight? I think these do. 1 John 2, verse 15 through 17. What does he say? He said, this happens, but guess what? It's going to increase. What's going to increase in the last days? The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. It's going to be so big. He saw it. And he's warning us about it. He didn't know when he died. He didn't know when he went to Ephesus. He didn't know if it would be 100 years or 2,000 years. Or 1,900 years. He didn't know. But he got a glimpse into seeing it. He knew some of the things he saw wasn't anything like he'd ever seen before. It wasn't the Roman army he was looking at. How incredible is this to look? Now, why do I bring this up? Because what about us? Lust of the flesh. What do you want? Lust of the eyes. We like to see. The pride of life ties back to those cornerstones of humility. We have to work on this. And you know why I thought of this was 2 years ago I was flying here to speak and to see all of you, and I was sitting next to a guy, and he was from Trinidad all the time. He was a visitor to Trinidad. He said, "Oh yeah, I come every year." I said, "Oh yes, yeah." And he said, "You ever been?" I said, "Yeah, I've been to Trinidad." Hey, yeah, have you ever been to Carnival? No? Oh man, you need to go. Man, he said, "It's a feast of the eyes." He said, "Have women so scantily dressed, and the beautiful colors and everything else." And he said, "And they party, and it's just like it's a week. You'll never forget it." You need to go, brethren. You know that. Why? Because you're turning to the bone. But you also are called to be godly to the bone. You see, out there are those who desire to be godly to the bone. They need a home. It is our job to build it. Brethren, this is it.